Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting panel discussion on the telecom industry. It's truly a pleasure to have each one of you here, and I trust you are all having a wonderful day. Today, have a very interesting topic to start with, which is empowering digital evolution through private wireless network. We'll discuss in detail about the same throughout our webinar. But before that, let me begin by introducing myself and AI CoreSpot to you. I'm Nitin Naveen, Vice President of Innovation Strategy at AI CoreSpot, which over a couple of decades of experience in different consulting firms specializing in emerging technologies, I feel fortunate to consistently engage with numerous stakeholders, innovators, global leaders, and all those who are driving this positive change. Joining me today, I have few of my colleagues, Arvind, Archana, and in the back end, Naveen, who will be infusing energy into this event. A big applause for their dedication in making efforts to make this gathering a great one. Some facts about AI CoreSpot, which I wanted to bring forward in this forum to all of you. It was founded over 3 years ago and is meant to be a source of inspiration in the tech space, focusing on emerging technologies such as AI, ML, robotics, IoT, and so on. Our AI CoreSpot webinars serve as a platform to share the latest advancement in these fields, providing fresh insights every month as we continue to gain momentum. We aim to be the leading AI-driven community worldwide, fostering collaboration and growth among like-minded individuals. We are committed to curating industry-backed webinars and hybrid events, leveraging insights from industry leaders, subject matter experts, and all our trusted partners to deliver credible and valuable content. Additionally, our content is meticulously crafted across various digital platforms, which includes blogs, podcasts, videos, monthly newsletters. It keeps our audience informed and engaged. Bringing back the attention to today's webinar, for which all of you are here for, the topic is transforming connectivity and catalyzing digital evolution via private wireless networks. So gear yourself for an enlightening discussion on AI and ML, high performance computing, IoT, 5G connectivity, and much more, which is creating excitement within the scope of telecom industry. Our panel of experts is poised to share invaluable insights and engage in thought-provoking discussions that promises to leave a lasting impact. Before starting the conversation, we would like to thank and extend gratitude to our community partners. We have 4 great companies, which includes Consolidated Communications US, Infovision, Tilson, and Celona. Their invaluable contributions have been instrumental in making today's webinar possible. And of course, a heartfelt thank to all our attendees. Your presence and participation are deeply appreciated. As we embark on this journey together, our primary goal is to equip with valuable insights and facilitate meaningful connections. Whether you walk away with innovative ideas or forge new connections, your engagement is a testament to our collective success. Without further delay, let's introduce our esteemed panels for today's session. Our first esteemed panel is Sandeep Shashikant. He's Director of Products and Services at Consolidated Communications US. Our second esteemed speaker is Jason Burns, who is Chief Information Officer of Tilson. Our third esteemed speaker is Pradyum Ramkumar, who is Head of Product Marketing, Celona. And fourth esteemed speaker and moderator for today's event is Vivek Parmar, Chief Business Officer at Infovision. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The views expressed by all our speakers are their personal ones, not related or doesn't reflect of their affiliated organizations. So let me hand over the stage to Vivek to begin this exciting panel discussion. Over to you, Vivek.
Thanks a lot, Nitin. So welcome everyone to this hugely relevant session. And why I say it's hugely relevant is I've been to the last couple of Mobile World Congresses and the 2 iterations of which I've attended. Private networks were a hot topic, right? Everyone who had anything to do with connectivity was kind of keen on exploring it. And then I can surely say that private networks are in vogue. Private mobile networks offers organizations and enterprises a very unique, secure, reliable, and flexible way to kind of support the communication infrastructure for a variety of their needs and requirements, right? So these networks have started to play a good supporting role in enabling a variety of digital transformation initiatives, improve productivity in many ways, enhancing safety and security across various industries and sectors. So the use cases are quite a bit, I would say. And there are various guesstimates on the market size of the private network market overall, but we're not going to get into a discussion on that topic because that's always contentious, right? But what we know is that the demand for high performing networks is increasing. And while the demand is increasing, I can also see that not everyone can afford it. I use the term afford not only literally, but the fact that many enterprises are not in a position to deploy or run them on their own. The typical question that many times comes up during conversations on private networks is the fact that whether an IT staff that has been all along been familiar to run a simple Wi-Fi access point, can they manage and run a cellular radio network, right? Public networks, on the other hand, do not guarantee you the performance that you're looking for. And although there are technologies like slicing, etc., that are on the horizon, private networks do offer some sort of an in-between solution that can work to the best advantage for an enterprise. There are various reasons enterprises can opt for a private network, I would say. And there are questions that you can ask yourself as an organization, right? Is your current network limiting your coverage in any way? For example, can your Ethernet or fiber or Wi-Fi reach where you want connectivity? Can it handle your expansion plans, for example? Do you really have some time-sensitive applications that you really want to cover? Think, for example, robotic control systems or AGVs, etc., that you have in your warehouse environment. Another question could potentially be: do you really need that higher bandwidth for your own sake? Can you make your private network or your own existing network, I would say, more secure than just via private cellular, right? How strong are your overall localization and privacy requirements are overall? So there are some of these questions that can help you determine whether you need a private network at all. And the idea for today's discussion is to delve into some of these questions and get some opinions from our panel of experts who've been there, done that in many ways for a variety of industries, and we look forward to kind of have this conversation going with them. So without much further ado, let's get on to the first set of questions that I had lined up, which is: why do customers need private networks and how it's impacting overall connectivity consumption pattern? And let me start with Sandeep for that question. Sandeep.
Hey, thanks, Vivek. So why do customers need private wireless network? That's a question that is pretty loaded, right? So if you look at the way things have changed over the past 10 years, specifically, and the transformation from Industry 3.0 to 4.0, which was a pretty significant timeline in terms of, and elongated too, right? People took a lot of time to move from automation to digitization, but then COVID happened. Things changed completely. People started looking at the way they lead their lives and do the business in a totally different perspective. And what that did was that blurred the lines between Industry 4.0 to 5.0. So digitization kind of went almost at 10x the speed, which basically means the demand for connectivity and the way people consume that connectivity completely changed from our previous understanding as to how that's going to evolve. So when living in a post-COVID world and having learned the lessons from what happened during COVID, specifically to the industry, right? Be it supply chain, be it anything else, be it logistics, it became imperative that, yes, we need to have reliable connectivity that is always available to give us real-time data to make sure that we run the business as smoothly as possible. One. Two, I think as this happens, obviously it involves a lot of cost. So what are the three strategic things that we're looking at? The first thing is speed. At what speed can we do it? The quality of service, the customer experience, both internal and external. And last, but definitely very important one, is the productivity, right? How are you going to gain that efficiency and productivity? So this has literally driven the adoption of automation to digitization to kind of Industry 5.0 standards, where they want to integrate all this. And if I may use the term, the world is getting Uberized, right? If you look at Industry 2, even though they look at it as an enterprise, the internal components within the enterprise are getting extremely Uberized. You need to have real time, you need what you want, when you want, and where you want. And that brings up the complexity of computing, and that brings in the demand of edge computing. So when you look at all these scenarios, the one thing that can definitely address that is a reliable private network that you can count on anytime. Now, with that said, how has that changed the consumption pattern? I mean, leave the consumer apart. When you look at the enterprise side, the demand for data, crazy. I mean, bigger the pie, higher the speeds. No, I want more. I want more. I want more, because there's so much happening in the cyber world that it's hard to keep up with the demands of the data and the consumption patterns overall. And you need that with a high throughput and, most importantly, low latency. That has become a critical factor in terms of how we actually use data, monitor data, and analyze data. So those are the things I would probably put at a very high level as to why industries would need a private network and how the consumption pattern has changed.
Very nice opening thoughts there, Sandeep. And I'm sure I've seen some news items, and Tilson doing some great work there. Jason, any thoughts from your side on this particular question?
I do. I think there's another avenue of exploration when it comes to the requirements for these type of networks. And one of them is in remote work or even urban work where radio access to current cellular networks isn't accessible. There's a lot of building going on inside this country right now that is happening far outside of the range of cellular networks, or due to the reduction in C-band deployment and getting those 5G radios out there into the market, into the mid cells and small cells, is leaving like a low area of latency when it comes to not having the access to the type of bandwidth requirements that are wanted. There are good examples of this, specifically in the construction and mining and gas sectors, where they've largely relied on satellite radios for a remote workforce, or even in urban environments where they're above 20 stories building these mega high rises now, where people don't think about wireless is no longer active for them as they're getting further up the towers and building, yet they're trying to introduce new areas of technologies like robotics, automated surveying. There's a lot going on there in the BIM management and using virtual systems that is driving more of a demand. And how do they get a better technology access when it comes to the bandwidth and the amount of devices that they're trying to put into these several types of building, processes that are going on out there. So there are definitely two areas I think people look for these networks, and I think did a great job of going through like why a structural organization might want to deploy these and maybe an area that already has access to cellular networks. Tilson deploys telecommunications across the country, both from a cellular mobile to fiber to the home, and you would think that's enough. But a lot of clients come to us, how do we get this area lit up so we can use these services? So there's a lot of other avenues when we look at building out these virtual networks for these customers in order to have access to cellular access.
Nice, very good. Updating this into the whole question of which verticals and use cases are driving traction within the private network market, and in fact the private 5G market. I'd like to kind of get, Pradyum, your thoughts on which verticals are you kind of looking at getting more traction initially, as we kind of look at this whole market that is kind of blossoming up. And then if you can kind of also highlight some of the use cases that you have worked on or are looking at and what your customers are demanding. You're on mute, Pradyum.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Vivek, for that question. So how do we look at the world? We look at the world as carpeted enterprise and uncarpeted enterprise. So carpeted enterprise, is your office buildings, your homes, your offices, all of them have great Wi-Fi connectivity. So it's really not a problem. But when you start looking at the uncarpeted enterprise is when you start having problems. What is an uncarpeted enterprise? Think about a factory, think about a warehouse, think about a refinery or a large, energy generation place. Think about the places, Jason just described, right? Remote locations where you may not have access to connectivity. So those are all uncarpeted space, and the traditional connectivity schemes, whether it be wired, Ethernet, or Wi-Fi, really don't fit those use cases because these are large open areas. They may be very metallic. There might be high noise levels, which does not allow the permeation of RF technologies. So you have a big challenge. So what lands up happening is a guy walking in a refinery still uses a paper and a pen to mark down, what the status of different equipment in the factory is. A worker working in a warehouse might actually be he might be equipped with all the fancy scanners in the world, Zebra scanners and Apple iPads. But if you don't have connectivity, you're not logging the data of the inventory live on your systems. So really, when I look at the use cases, it comes down to connected workers. So how do you enable the worker to have all the data he needs when he's doing his job? If you're working in a factory, how can I empower the technician to have all the data sheets he needs, all the specifications he needs to do his job correctly and his work order, and basically connected machines, which means whether you talk about IoT, predictive maintenance, whether you talk about AI, ML, applying application into cameras and things like that, all of them require connectivity. And these are at remote locations in your factories and refineries and things like that. How do you connect them? That's the driving use case for private wireless. And like I said, the uncarpeted enterprise that we focus on is manufacturing, oil and gas, and distribution and logistics. So these are probably the three of the big verticals that at least Salona is looking at.
And do they kind of come up with different requirements from their side? I mean, what I'm trying to get at is are the requirements vertical specific in any way, or is it mostly like connecting what you said, the uncarpeted areas there?
Yeah, I mean, the joke in our company is we call it no factory left behind. This is like very basic stuff. You would think this day and age everybody has a connected device and who can navigate the entire factory or a site or a thing, but that's not the case. People are still using paper and pen. So our motto is no factory left behind.
That's interesting. Sandeep, anything from your side on what kind of use cases and opportunities you are seeing on the private network side, maybe even beyond the enterprise segment?
Sure, and that's pretty intriguing, right? I mean, it is similar to the way internet evolved, right? It was specifically meant for, all right, it's a secret mission, this is where it's going to happen, and then it got consumerized so much that today we literally call it an utility, right? So that's the way things are going to move right now, even though you're talking about a private wireless network specific to an enterprise segment. Think about what matters to the consumer segment, right? I mean, think about your own homes, right? Mm-hmm. And to Pradyum's point, your home is also a sort of a factory right now. Think about the number of devices that are connected in your household. How many devices we have on an average? On an average in the US, at least, you have 28 connected devices in a household. I'm not even kidding you, 28, and that's only growing. So when you have so many connected devices and gaming almost becoming a phenomenon in terms of, okay, I need to go and do this on a daily basis, there is a huge appetite for ensuring three things, at least when it comes to the consumer segment. I think there's huge opportunity as this whole thing evolves, right? Today, one of the big concerns, at least, I mean, not that industry is not concerned or the enterprise is not concerned, but something of prime concern and the consumer is getting very aware of is security, right? It is extremely important. Security is at the top of mind of any consumer that you talk to. Like, I have so many devices connected. I don't know what my devices are doing. Your network at times is not reliable. I had a dip in my Wi-Fi. I don't know where my pet is. I don't know where my dog is. I don't know what's happening in my garage, in my yard. There's a lot of concern. So when you start actually consumerizing this particular product and start taking it in bits and pieces to the consumer segment, there is a huge opportunity for us to go there, right? I'm talking about the urban part. But to Jason's point, there's this huge rural market. There's a huge rural market that most of the telecom companies specifically do not pay so much of attention because of density, but there's lots of money to be made out there, and there's so much of demand. And I'll give you a classic example. Think of a countryside in the US and a farmer having 40 acres and livestock. Now, depending upon the weather or depending upon what that person does specifically, the farmer does specifically, he or she is in a continuous need of monitoring the barn, monitoring the livestock. Think about a use case where a farmer has a cow that's about to deliver a calf, right? And his house is almost about, let's say, 2 miles away from where the actual barn is. How is he supposed to keep a real-time tracking of what's going to happen? Is he going to rely on your fixed wireless network, or is he going to rely on a Wi-Fi network, or is she going to depend upon the camera that it's a hit or miss? No, they need assurity, right? And mind you, if you get a reliable, secure, quality service to that particular segment, they are willing to pay for it. So as telecom companies struggling with revenues on the voice side, trying to be ahead in the dog race of, okay, I'm going to offer you a gig for less than what other person is offering, they are looking continuously to monetize and get that ARPU lift from somewhere. Is there a particular segment that you can target by using this private wireless network? This is the place. So there's a huge opportunity, be it urban or be it rural, and rolling it down to the consumer level by productizing it from an enterprise to the consumer segment. So that's a huge opportunity that I see going forward. It's already happening in bits and pieces. It's just a matter of time when you have that as a special value-added services to say that, okay, you're going to buy Wi-Fi from us. I tell you what, I'm going to make sure that you have a private network within your home, within your farm, and I will give it to you as a maintained service, right? As a managed service. Huge potential, huge potential.
Very pertinent, Sandeep. Actually, in fact, I was reading up on a couple of articles which talked about how John Deere was kind of attacking this particular market segment, the whole farm segment, right? And how they're connected tractors and what they're doing in Brazil and all. So very pertinent overall. Thanks for those thoughts. That gets me on to the next question, right? I mean, when you talk about this whole, rural setup or any setup by that matter for radio networks, there are challenges involved in kind of installation, first of all, and then operating them, right? So I'm going to go to Jason for this one. Jason, what is it that you are seeing in terms of the installation and operational challenges in kind of deploying these private networks? And more importantly, how is Tilson helping mitigate some of these wireline and wireless connectivity issues overall that are prevalent in the market?
Great question. I think when I review this idea of like where the biggest challenges, there's many. But like cost is a barrier and has been for a long time in order to stand up these structures and even get them in place. I believe that over the last 24 months, we've seen significant advancement in the tools and equipment, devices, things that you can buy, and watching the downtrends and cost on those, opening up specific features, not needing to do like physical emplacements in order to run them. I think those are all advantages. Think of like a building owner who gets poor cellular coverage inside, but not big enough to qualify for a DAS emplacement, from a carrier. This starts looking more attractive in order to make their employees happy so they can have cellular coverage inside of their walls. Just one example. I think a second big area is, can they even get backhaul connectivity? Can they get the fiber to the door that's needed in order to run that tower that they're about to construct? Or even cable at that matter, right? So we look at rural or just outside of like urban environments, semi-rural environments where, just a few years ago, you weren't anywhere close to a lateral or some kind of backbone, fiber haul that you could even pull into. I think what we're going to see and what we have seen just recently is more access to fiber in general, as we're crisscrossing the country at a tremendous rate right now. BEAD funding alone will drive more of that fiber on the ground for us to get that backhaul fiber, which will help relieve that issue that we're seeing of just getting the connectivity to that local tower. And then I think the third is managing it. A lot of clients that we talk to, they want to put these up, or maybe they have a microwave stations now they're using in order to get information around, and they're looking at using like a private cellular network, or they just don't know how to handle their IoT devices that they now hung off those networks. And NOC services have become a tremendous need in some of these areas because they might have the infrastructure capabilities to stand up, what they need either in the virtual network or local and manage all those components. They don't know how to monitor them when they get them out there. It's just too much for them. They don't want to build out an entire, follow the sun around their operations in order to manage that thing that they just did. Or even if it's, not so critical case, but they don't know how to manage of, that tower they just put up, how do they get it fixed? Who can actually come out here and take a look at it, and who can tell them if it's down or up? So, Tilson has its own NOC enterprise that it looks at just telecommunication equipment, which is kind of like a little niche on its own. It's not like a standard thing, but those three areas are really impactful to people when they're evaluating, cost, access to the backhaul fiber, and then how do they monitor and maintain that network once they put it up.
Interesting. The NOC piece is interesting because that's where the management of that network comes in, right? So interesting. Pradyum, anything from your side? Salona, by its very nature, wanted to kind of disrupt this market in many ways from the bigger players in the market. What are your thoughts? What are the barriers that you are seeing to deployment of private 5G at enterprises? And what sort of considerations are you kind of looking at when you're deploying private 5G?
Sure. So just a little background on Salona. Most of our founders actually come from the Wi-Fi space, Aruba and Ruckus and places like that. So they have sold Wi-Fi for a very long time, and they exactly know what the problems with Wi-Fi are as well. But when they started looking at the cellular space and they started looking at private cellular initially, they were seeing the telcos, right? Like the big name people who supply to the telcos. And they're trying to take a macro network architecture and just almost shoehorn it into an enterprise network. What does that mean? You buy radios from someone, you're buying devices from someone, and magically all this stuff is supposed to work together. So for people who've been in the telecom industry, this is like an army of people that is needed to actually make this thing work together, right? So the fundamental philosophy of Salona is, how do we simplify the whole thing? How do we kind of get it to a point where it looks like a Wi-Fi network to an enterprise? So what does that entail? It entails basically tying into the enterprise network, just like Wi-Fi would, right? So you basically have your LAN network connected to the 5G network. So if you are managing security policies, if you're using the same firewall, you're using the same routing, DHCP, and everything else in your enterprise network, you're just extending it into the 5G network. So that's kind of one of the building philosophies, and this resonates very, very well with the enterprise. The next one is Jason's point on managing the network, right? So yes, you require some level of cellular expertise to go set up this network. Okay, so the RF design part of it, going and setting up the radios. But once you set it up, it is kind of more Wi-Fi like, right? What do you want to do? You want to add some devices to the network, or you want to just see whether the network is up and running, right? Those things, enterprise IT engineer is completely capable of doing. And so the building philosophy for us is, how do we kind of build an orchestration layer that looks very much like how somebody would manage a Wi-Fi network, and how do you bring that into the enterprise? So that was the building philosophies, and these things have resonated, right? Because you're breaking down the complexity aspect of things, you're making it look like Wi-Fi. You're familiar with A, so look at B. I think that resonates very well.
Okay. And what, Sandeep, I wanted to get you in on any aspects of installation or operational challenges that you may be facing or kind of seeing in the market, and any thoughts on how Consolidated is kind of looking at those challenges and addressing them?
That's a great question, right? So when you think of monetizing this new concept and trying to roll it out to medium and enterprise, I'm talking from a service provider perspective, that, hey, what more can I offer other than just connectivity? Can I offer a managed service? What next, right? When you think of doing this, the primary issues or some of the most concerning things that we are facing right now, or coming up to the service providers in general, is operationalizing this whole concept and taking it to the market and giving that to our customers, right? And when I say operationalizing, I bring in the issue of expertise. You don't have enough people for you to take it out, productize, and deploy and make it happen to meet the SLAs, and also ensure optimum customer experience. Here are service providers who are not even able to have enough techs to go and do the installs in the consumer space. And here we are talking about a deployment that is probably 20x in terms of time, resource, and material. You don't have that expertise today in the market. And COVID and gig economy is not helping, because people are moving and jumping from one place to another because you don't have enough talent in the market. You don't have enough expertise in the market. And to Jason's and Pradyum's point, you got to have a NOC and you got to manage it. Who's going to invest in that? Is that going to be something that the carriers would want to do? Hell no. They want to get out of as many business as possible and just try to do a handover and get a revenue share. They don't want to be in that business unless until, of course, want to buy a media house and talk about media. None of them are interested in building a data center or building a NOC for a new set of service. You have a dearth of talent. You have a dearth of expertise. So for all the people in the audience who are scared of AI taking away your jobs, tell you what, become a technician. You will probably make more money in the coming years than any of us sitting out here and talking about it. There is a huge demand. You need the expertise to manage the NOC. I mean, there's only so much a software can do. Rest, everything has to be done. You need that human interface. And today, there is a huge resource constraint. Two, it's all about the money, right? If I take a concept to my CFO, I need to justify the TCO, the total cost of ownership, right? How am I going to kind of balance that out? And that is where I see, the lining, the silver lining is the private wireless network definitely has a good business case to kind of justify the cost of ownership with people like Pradyum and Jason and the companies and what their company does. It definitely reduces that amount of OpEx that a carrier might think in their business case, to say that, hey, I can do this with Jason, I can do this with Pradyum, I really don't have to invest so much, and I can justify my business case where my CFO would say, hey, yeah, this is great. Third point is, I always give this analogy that it's always easier to build a new house rather than renovating an existing one. It's super expensive, super painful, and it's never ending. Right? That's the case with this thing too. Now, think about the infrastructure the carriers have, the telecom companies have. And these are age old, right? You're talking about copper under the ground for 100 years, or, you have these poles and towers that are lying out there. What are you going to do with all of that? Mm-hmm. Are you going to say that, okay, I'm going to put everything out there and going to sell it at whatever rate I get per weight? No, it's not going to happen. This is the infrastructure that they have. They invested their money in it. So we need to come out with innovative ways of how you're going to integrate this new technology with the existing infrastructure. Do you have things that can talk to one another? Do you have the devices? Do you have the middleware? Do you have the things that that can make the integration seamless? Because that's one thing everybody jumps out of their skin is, how much of IT resource will I need
for this?
Integrate. Okay, yeah. Forget the IT resource and the IT cost. What about the device cost? What about the hardware cost? And then once you have hardware, guess what? Maintenance comes into place. Whom are you going to go to? So, there are a lot of unanswered questions, at least for, a carrier to go, jump into it and say, hey, I want to do this. But it's not easy. There are a lot of questions to be answered. I think we need to take baby steps in terms of how we are going to productize and monetize this for us to build a solid business case to say, okay, this is going to be the new vertical. This is where we're going to target. So those are the top three, challenges that I can see, at least from a career perspective, starting with resource, my friend. Resource is a huge issue today.
Very passionately put, I would say, Sandeep. Yeah, sorry, Jason, did you want to kind of come in?
It's just, you're 100%, right on, Sandeep. You really are. Like, we're going to sit here and have this conversation around the cost of ownership. And I think that the reason why we're seeing the rise in looking for these networks is because we expected that the 5G deployments would go faster than they are, but the carriers don't have the money to stand up the small cells that are required. And here we are left without 5G bandwidth. Your radio says it, but you don't have it, right? There's a point in time where we're going to cross where we're demanding that bandwidth, and what the carriers are going to shift those burdens onto us in order to stand up the networks that we need in order to survive on that, because we're building our technology forward on it. You mentioned AI, you mentioned all these things that will come. How long is it going to take to get that infrastructure built, and will they pay for it? It's almost like it's being shifted down to the enterprises and to the consumer to figure that out now. So you hit a button there, which was really well said. So thank you.
That's true. That's true. So I wanted to ask a hot button question, but I see a couple of questions from the audience also, which I'll put forward to the panel. One of them is, can you share examples of successful strategies for overcoming specific wireless connectivity issues within private networks, such as interference or signal attenuation? Anybody has some thoughts on what they've experienced in this space?
Yeah, so I can comment a little bit. So when you compare it with Wi-Fi, I mean, like where we are replacing Wi-Fi with private cellular, again, we go back to high metal environments like factories and things like that. So there are two issues, right? Like with Wi-Fi, you have a lower transmit power. So you're actually you can probably cover maybe 5,000 square feet with one access point. Whereas with a private cellular, especially with an outdoor private cellular working on the CBRS band, you can actually go hit maybe 1 million square feet. Again, I'm talking about outdoor deployments, 1 million square foot with one access point. And the reason for that is the high transmit power that you can do with cellular, and also the devices, the UEs as we call them, they can operate on a lower floor. So with a cellular-based device, you can pick up a weaker signal and still have good quality transmission, which is not possible with Wi-Fi. So the answer to the question is basically by boosting the signal strength, you're able to actually reach more people in those kinds of environments.
Simple, huh? Let's keep it simple. That's the way. All right, very nice. Anything from your side, Jason? Anything that you may be seeing on this front?
I think that he covered it well in his explanation. It's the same thing I would have said. So.
I want to add one more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So there was also a question about wired connectivity. I was doing some research on this, and cost of actually wired infrastructure is wicked expensive. I read somewhere it is between $8 to $18 a square feet to wire something. And I can tell you, when I say we light up 1 million square feet with one outdoor access point, it's nowhere close to it. It's kind of fraction of that, right? And we are seeing this more with the greenfield opportunities. You know, I think Sandeep had spoken about greenfield, brand new factories that are being set up and things like that. They're just reconsidering. It's like, hey, if I can go manufacture this, I can have a very flexible manufacturing floor. I can go build widget A here, widget B there. Do I really need wired? Can I kind of get away from wired and just use a private cellular network to go do that? It's a completely new way of thinking. Is it a very risky thing to think about? Yeah, probably. Everything comes with risk, but then that's where the innovation part of it comes to.
I agree. Ask me about the cost of setting up a wired network connection. My son is into gaming, by the way, and he insisted that I get an Ethernet connection dedicated to his gaming computer. This was just last week. And other than the holes that I see in my wall or ripped apart just to get that one cable down from my access point here, the costs were prohibitive. So I can just imagine what would happen in an enterprise scenario where you've got to just lay out those Ethernet cables and all that stuff. Very pertinent, Pradyum. Thanks for pointing that out. So then I'll get on to the hot button question, which can trigger a lot of people, which is, will private cellular networks replace Wi-Fi, right? Or can they just be friends, and is convergence an option at all for all of us? So maybe we can start with Pradyum, since you kind of alluded to it a little bit in your previous answer. what are your thoughts on it? And especially given, you also mentioned that some of your founders have been ex-Wi-Fi guys and have been with those companies. So what do you think on this topic?
Yeah. So the answer is, I think Wi-Fi is great in places where it works. So really, we don't try to go after somebody whose Wi-Fi network just works great and try to convince him to use private wireless. That's like the worst sales pitch you can make, because he doesn't have a problem. So what are you trying to solve for, right? So it works well in offices, it works well in homes, and Wi-Fi has a lot more bandwidth than CBRS today, for example. So there are some advantages to Wi-Fi. Now, where you are not able to get Wi-Fi is where private network solves a problem, and that's the vast outdoors, high metal environments, manufacturing floors, where Wi-Fi just doesn't work, just because it's not the RF traffic generated by Wi-Fi is not suitable for those environments, or it's limited range. The other area where we see, and one thing I wanted to add, and this actually goes to the total cost of ownership. And all the Wi-Fi experts in my company are, just because you don't have coverage in an area, just by adding more access points, you're not going to solve the problem. In fact, you will worsen the problem. You worsen the problem because of a phenomenon called co-channel interference. All the Wi-Fi things are kind of riding on each other, and there's collision, and you're not able to get the effect of this thing. So instead of spending your money on co-channel interference and solving those problems, maybe you consider private wireless. It might be a better alternative. And then you have things like robotics, where the robot is moving across. Let's say you have a warehouse which is 700,000 square feet. You cannot cover the whole thing with one access point. You're going to need multiple access points. And when your robot actually goes from one access point to another, there's something called a handoff that's happening. And Wi-Fi networks are not designed for handoff, because the basically, for various technical reasons, there's a lot of contention on the network, and you may not be guaranteed a space on the next access point when you go from one region to another region. But cellular, from the ground up, is built for something like this, right?
Yeah.
You go travel on a freeway, you're jumping from one cell tower to another cell tower. This is what it's designed for. And handoffs work well. It's managed by the infrastructure rather than the device. And overall manageability of the network, right? On one hand, you have Wi-Fi, which is a very contention-based mechanism, whereas a private cellular network is actually infrastructure managed. So it's much more smoother transitions for mobility for AGVs, when you're operating programmable logic controllers like in a factory and things like that, where latency needs to be very controlled. You need a network that can support you there, and that's why we are seeing private network flourish over Wi-Fi. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think they're going to coexist, but it's going to serve different purposes.
Interesting. Jason, can they be friends or no?
I agree that there's a place for both of them, and it's cost prohibitive to enter into a private cellular network. In a lot of cases, there has to be a reason for it. And it's not even just prohibitive like on the upfront, it's a long-term cost that you're getting involved with right now. So like we need to see the economies of scale probably shift in the right direction to make it affordable at a consumer base, so we could see maybe more traction in those areas where you might want to replace wireless. Like I think of like my original, when we started out, I talked about construction companies looking at it to use to build high rises, and it's expensive. They're great for 40-50% of the job, and then they have to start laying in radios as they're moving further up the tower, because steel blocks the signals after a few floors of concrete and steel, and they need repeaters. And the question becomes like, well, does that convert to a carrier DAS, and can you build that into the building up front? But they're questioning that. They really want the access, but they only want it for 3 years. Is it worth the investment? Can it be moved to another site? But wireless restricts them. And a lot of it is about how many devices can jump onto those nodes. They don't want to put many up. So like this is where the cellular network looks more attractive again. So it's really balancing, what are you looking to achieve? What is your traffic? What's the space that traffic and the distance you need it to cover? So I think those are all really good questions, but I think that wireless lives on, and at least in the foreseeable future.
Mhm. Interesting. Sandeep, anything from your side on this hot topic? Wi-Fi and private networks, can they be friends?
I think Pradyum and Jason kind of hit the nail on the head. To your question, can they be friends? I would go one step ahead. I would say yes. In fact, they can be two girlfriends sharing the same boyfriend. That's the kind of relationship that's going to evolve out there. And no, please don't take me the wrong way, but that's the way I mean, that's the way it's gonna be. It's gonna be symbiotic. They're going to be mutually complementary, right? I mean, think about it today too, right? I mean, look at the fiber backhaul for all the wireless providers, right? Huge thing. You need those handoffs. You need to manage, and again, from a carrier perspective, it's all of the quality of service, right? So you need to leverage what you already have when you do something new to make sure that you're optimizing your operations and optimizing your cost. And the need of the market too, right? To Jason's point, I mean, think about it, right? As you get into a world, probably in the next 5 years, we'll see more self-driving cars than we see today, right? You're going to see more drone deliveries in the next 2 years. Think about it. Now, all these need the same bandwidth in the spectrum that you're trying to operate on. And there's only so much one place can handle. So you need to have a handover or a handoff at some point in time. You need to have that mid layer to make it happen. However, where there is money, there's government. So wait for regulatory to come up with some stupid things to manage private wireless network, and then the fun begins. So they can exist. So as much as there is no interference from a regulatory body, I mean, it is definitely required where it is required, right? Health, defense, yes. But you would probably need to get a balance in terms of how you're going to balance the Wi-Fi and the private, wireless network. But overall, they will coexist for a long, long time. I think they need one another.
Sure. I'll look at the questions that we see on the chat. I think we've answered Raghav's question in many ways in terms of what tech and how it's advancing digital evolution. So yeah, that got covered in one of the questions that we asked before. So let's go ahead. One of the things that is kind of coming into prominence is this whole concept of neutral host, right? So Pradyum, to start with you, how do you think this whole neutral host concept is changing the landscape of private 5G?
Sure. So neutral host, for those who don't know what it is actually the ability for a private network provider such as Celona to retransmit maybe in the US a T-Mobile signal or a AT&T signal inside a building. So what that means is you're using the network infrastructure that you're setting up for your private network. You're reusing that same network infrastructure to bring the macro cell network inside the building. So why do you need to do that? That's because the construction material and everything that they use in modern day buildings don't permeate the cell phone traffic to come inside. And 80% of the cell phone conversations actually happen indoors rather than outdoors. So this is a huge problem. And people have traditionally used a technology called DAS, Distributed Antenna System, which is kind of a very legacy telco gear. It even from the time you say I want DAS to actually you have it installed is the best case in a year, and you need one for each carrier that you actually bring in. So this becomes an enormous thing, and then they want their own backhaul. They want there's contractors involved. I mean, you'll end up paying a lot of money. Whereas the value proposition of actually reusing a private network infrastructure to retransmit a carrier signal inside become very, very valuable because you already have a network for private networks, and then you're basically double dipping on it to actually provide a neutral host service inside a building. So I know I've been talking a lot about uncarpeted enterprise. This neutral host is the one area where we want to, where we'd be able to bring the value of private networks to an in-building solution. Okay, and we are very excited about it. The big barrier to entry is getting all the partnerships signed with the carriers, because now when you're retransmitting a carrier thing, you need a carrier retransmission agreement. You need to be able to meet the KPIs that the carrier sets for their voice and data transmission inside the building. So there are a lot of regulatory things that we have to jump over, but we are very, very excited about this technology.
Nice. That's important, because I've seen a lot of topics and posts about people talking about neutral hosts, so to say. And I think sharing is always caring, and I think in some ways it kind of gets onto that bandwagon too in many ways. So hopefully we'll see more traction in the coming days on that front. I know we are just about towards the right end of the session, but I have a couple of more questions that I think I can squeeze in. And one of the important questions overall that I thought we should discuss, that we can discuss on this forum, is on the devices front, right? So how are things progressing on the devices front in the private network domain, especially with respect to the enterprise, right? I know I saw some news on Apple devices kind of now supporting some aspects of private networks with their PLMN IDs and all that stuff. Any thoughts from anybody on the panel on what they think are the devices front? What are the challenges and how things are shaping up there?
I can go if
Sure.
others are not. So yeah, so this device interoperability is actually a big challenge in the industry, right? Because now you're actually working on a different band, and depending on the country you're deploying a private network in, it's a different band, different frequency that you need to support. And there is a lot of mismatch between what a device manufacturer says he can support and what a network operator like us, can support. So we are trying to resolve that problem with some interoperability programs and things like that we have in place at Soluna. But the device ecosystem is definitely moving. Primarily, Zebra and Apple are the big, in the industrial space, these are the big devices in place. Apple with iOS 17, they launched a whole bunch of features for private wireless. They basically able to prioritize the network. You can prioritize private over Wi-Fi over cellular. And based on the location, whether you're outside the factory, you can basically connect to a particular network. When you're inside the factory, you can connect to a particular network. You have the ability to do that with the eSIM programmability on the device, as well as geofencing capabilities that Apple has built into their Apple devices.
Yep, interesting. I saw that news. So that's interesting. Okay, Sandeep, yeah, I think you wanted to kind of add a bit on the neutral host. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. What are your thoughts on that? I think we can.
Pradyum kind of covered. I mean, there's so much of development that needs to take place for the handover and the middleware. But on the neutral host itself, there's a huge opportunity, right? And if you actually look at what what's the name of the company? American Tower, right? And for those of you who don't know, American Tower owns more towers in the US than Verizon and AT&T. Now, they have already developed the business model to go to the next step of supporting what we would call as the rural stretch of the connectivity, because there is a huge demand for us to make sure that we take the connectivity to the rural areas. At the same time, the government has cut funding. So how are you going to kind of, make sure that you still get the money from that particular segment? That is where the neutral host will come into play, right? So that will help carriers minimize their investment to the lowest possible denominator, one, and ensure the last mile connectivity, and at the same time leverage what's already in place, and not to mention the huge demand for the mid-haul and the backhaul of the capacity. So neutral hosts are going to play an extremely important role when it comes to extending the rural internet connectivity and bridging that digital divide. That is one of the biggest digital evolutions that's going to take place.
I agree. Yep. And that, I think, takes us right till the end of our conversation. I don't think we have time for any more questions, but very interesting thoughts, and appreciate all the comments that you've made, Jason, Sandeep, Pradyum. Thanks a lot for your time and coming on this panel and answering all the questions we had. I hope it was a a good session that that kind of covered the topic threadbare on almost all aspects of private network, and much appreciated. Thank you so much. Over to you, Nitin.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivek, and thank you all the speakers and all the attendees who came together. So I extend my gratitude to Vivek for the excellent moderation of today's session. Big thanks to you goes out to Vivek for that. And also to all our speakers, Sandeep, Jason, Pradyum, for your insightful contributions to this discussion on wireless solutions. I'm confident that all attendees would have found it very engaging, enlightening. I'm sure they got something out of this. As we wrap up this conversation, I would like to take a moment to recognize and thank all our community partners, speakers, and attendees for their ongoing support and participation over the past 3 years. Your involvement has played a crucial role in creating an environment conducive to knowledge sharing and enrichment. The insights shared by the panel members were truly exceptional, and we appreciate their collaborative spirit and expertise. For those who have missed any part of today's session or wish to revisit it, the recording will be available on our company's YouTube page for your convenience. Looking ahead, we are excited about the promising technological advancements that lies ahead in the coming months. At AI Core Spot, we have a diverse line of events and webinars planned across various sectors, which includes telecom, banking, financial insurance, industry, retail, supply chain, manufacturing, healthcare, and much more. We encourage you to stay connected with us for the ongoing learning, opportunities, and updates on the latest technological developments. You can find a wealth of knowledge, including detailed about event announcements, registration assistance, and a lot of many things on our website and social media channels. Your support is invaluable to us, so please consider liking and sharing our content with your networks. A special mention to InfoVision, who is our esteemed knowledge and innovation partner, and Digit7, who is our technology partner, for their unwavering support and collaboration. Be sure to explore their websites to deep dive into the world of technological updates. We thoroughly enjoyed hosting this session and hope you also find it as enriching as we did. We look forward to continuing our journey together and bringing you much more insightful sessions in the near future as well. Until then, take care. Thank you once again for your participation and support. Have a great day and a nice weekend ahead. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks.